So the confessions are very different. If we can look at a confession by a woman, Mary Osgood. And I asked this question earlier, and I asked my students, why would a person confess to witchcraft? Partly, I think the reason is that after a while, and by September, when she confessed, this might have been her situation, that she thought she'd get off if she confessed, because they didn't seem to be hanging the confessors, so that seemed like a good strategy. But more than that, what I like to look for in these confessions is what was compelling to the magistrates. You couldn't just say, yeah, I did it, and call it a day. I mean, you had to, the confessions had to be realistic. They had to, seems weird to say they have to be realistic. They sound so preposterous, but realistic to the audience. And I think what we have here in the confessions is a justification and kind of a legitimation as to what the court was doing, because there was some criticism about the way the court was handling the whole thing. So in these confessions, in a lot of them, you have a lot more going on than just a simple, yes, I did it. She confesses that about 11 years ago, when she was in a melancholy state and condition, she used to walk abroad in her orchard, and upon a certain time she saw the appearance of a cat at the end of the house, which yet she thought was a real cat. However, at that time it diverted her from praying to God, and instead thereof she prayed to the devil, about which time she made a covenant with the devil, who, as a black man, came to her and presented her a book, upon which she laid her finger, and that left a red spot, and that upon her signing the devil told her he was her God, and that she should serve and worship him, and she believes she consented to it. She says further that about 2 years ago she was carried through the air in the company with Deacon Fry's wife, Ebenezer Baker's wife, and Goody Tyler to 5 Mile Pond, where she was baptized by the devil, who dipped her face in the water and made her renounce her former baptism and told her she must be his, soul and body, forever, and that she must serve him, which she promised to do. So there's a lot going on here. She is really giving the court exactly what they want to hear. Because, well, and also what people in the audience and the ministers and everything would have recognized this kind of language. Because, for one thing, beyond the bounds of a witchcraft crisis, ministers would have told people in church on Sundays and other days of the week that you kind of have a choice between God or the devil. It's up to you. You know, you can choose to go God's path, you can take Satan's path. So she's basically saying that back, that she had a former baptism, but then the devil came to her, presented her with this book. She had to renounce her former baptism, go with him. The key part here is that she consented to it. She confesses she's afflicted 3 persons, and she mentions the people, and that she did it by pinching her bedclothes and giving consent the devil should do it in her shape, and that the devil could not do it without her consent. So she's, says this a number of times, and I think this kind of was appealing to the court to hear this, to the magistrates to hear this. It's like, oh, look, we are doing the right thing. The devil just can't go and take anybody's shape, or he doesn't seem to want to do that. He wants to get their consent. He wants to get these witches' consent. That's what makes somebody a witch. So I think it was very legitimating to their whole process, even though they were under some fire for the way they were proceeding. Another thing on the that she says that's important, that also would have resonated with people at the time, and the question is, do you know the devil can take the shape of an innocent person and afflict? And she says, I believe he cannot. And they say, who taught you this way of witchcraft? And she says, Satan, and that he promised her abundance of satisfaction and quietness in her future state, but never performed anything, and she has lived more miserably and more discontented since than ever before. So this would have also been an interesting thing for them to hear, and kind of a realistic thing, because in the context of a weekly sermon, the minister might have said, if Satan tries to lure you into his clutches, he might promise you a lot of things. You might think that he's going to come through on those things, but he never does. So that's not a good idea to go down his path. So she's kind of mimicking exactly what the ministers might have said. He promised her things, but never performed anything. And not only that, she's been miserable ever since. So I could almost imagine people saying, yep, that's how the devil is. He's very clever that way. And, you know, that's how it works. So anyway, so there's these elements in a confession that show to me that one of the key issues to look at is not so much why people confessed, but how they confessed. You know, what were the important elements that kind of made for a successful confession, and a successful confession meaning one that you didn't die as a result of. I think in general, Puritans were more likely to, even though they thought that men and women were equally available to bond with the devil, they thought that women were more likely to, that women were, had a predisposition to bond with Satan,